Welcome back to another episode of the RNA podcast. Riley and I had guest Seth Fader on today. It was definitely one of our most influential podcasts, Riley.
Yeah, for sure. We talked for a while with Seth. It was our longest one that we've had so far. But I will say, I think we both learned a lot. It's good to have somebody with so much experience covering sports. Like he said, he's been with the tour for 20 years, worked for CNN Sports Illustrated for 4 years there in the 90s. It's also, though, somebody who played Division I baseball as well, played in the College World Series. So a lot to talk about today with Seth.
Yeah, definitely one of our best episodes. I hope you guys enjoy.
All right, Seth. Well, we are happy to have you here on the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I feel like I know both of you really well in different ways from your parents and/or other ways. So just so excited to be here and appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and you had mentioned how you're going to make our podcast demographic a bit older, but
a lot older.
It is common though. You're sticking to the theme of you were a former Division I athlete, so that does stick with the theme. However, I think we're a little bit more interested to talk to you about what you're doing now here in the future. But we are excited to have you on.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's funny because now at my age, I think back, it seems like a whole nother life ago when I was that athlete, if you will. I can barely get out of bed these days, so it's it seems like it's a lifetime ago for sure.
Yeah, so everybody watching this, I don't think they know about your background a little bit. So maybe you just tell us a little bit about that. I know you played baseball at the University of Miami, and you played in a College World Series, correct?
Yeah, so I was there. My freshman year was 1991, long before you two were born. I ended up playing through 93, but I graduated in 95. So I was there. My very first year, my freshman year, was the last year of, and again, not a lot of people are going to know this, but this guy they called the Wizard of College Baseball. His name was Ron Frazier, and he was our manager, just a legendary coach. So everything you see now on ESPN, the College World Series in Omaha, like everything was all because of Ron Frazier and the Wizard of College Baseball. He had AstroTurf introduced for the first time. He had mascots and cheerleaders, and it was just an amazing thing what he did around there. So his last year was my first year, so I got to see that, which is pretty cool. And as a freshman, and Miami at that point had won 2 or 3 national championships. It was just amazing to be a part of that. And then I get hurt. And then there's a transition we ended up having 3 coaches in 3 years.
Wow.
And Jim Morris, who just left 2 years ago, ended up being the coach for the next 30 years. So they've had a pretty good run there. I think they have 5 or 6 national championships, and it was really fun, but really quick.
Yeah. Well, and we can talk about this too. You grew up in the Boston area, correct? So how did you make the transition from growing up in the Boston area to going all the way down to the University of Miami?
Yeah, well, and I will say this is kind of one of my sort of, if I could throw my dad voice in on this, my piece of advice to everybody: you have to follow. There are people throughout your life that will give you help. That will help, whether it's your career, whether it's athletics, it could be job, it could be just life in general. And I have been lucky enough to have a lot of people, and also to listen to those people, because I think there are a lot of people in your lives that are here to help that you don't necessarily maybe don't follow. And I was always smart about following these people. So I was in Boston, and back then, I mean, even now, like our baseball season, it started at the end of March, like right before. I mean, because it was snowing and raining. I mean, they just had a storm in Boston yesterday, snowstorm. So it was very difficult to play. We used to have all our practices inside the basketball gym. I used to dread running the stairs from the pool all the way to the top floor and back, and that was how we got our our conditioning in, taking line drive, taking ground balls, on the basketball court, so it's skipping and you're just getting destroyed. But I had a pitching coach that I would do in the off season, and he had gone to Florida Southern, which was at the time the number 1 Division II team in the country. They're in Lakeland, Florida, and he was like, "Hey, you should go to Florida Southern. I think you'll love it there." And so we ended up making a trip down to Florida. I went to Florida Southern, USF, Florida State, and Miami. And as my dad had always told me, you need to pick the school that even if you don't play, you're going to be happiest at.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember walking on the campus of the University of Miami, and it's February. I'm 18 years old. I'm walking around, and it's palm trees, and it's 75 degrees, and all the other stuff that goes along with that. And I just looked at him. I'm like, this is the place. So then it was, let's have my pitching coach send letters, send videos, and really fought for my career there, because they would not have known of me if I hadn't I've been my own advocate, if you will.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I think, I'm going through that now. You mentioned the northern style of baseball. I'm up in Pennsylvania, trying to play baseball, and our past 4 or 5 days we've been shut down because it's raining outside. It's in the 30s again. It's pretty brutal, especially compared to what you had down at University of Miami and what I had, in high school down in Florida.
Yeah.
So it's
yeah,
a
it
big
is.
difference.
Brutal is the word. If you can play in a game in New England in April, or even late March in April, if you could pitch in those conditions, like when I got down to Miami, I was like, I'm loose. I didn't have to stretch. I didn't have to warm up. I was ready to throw. It was so warm, and again, you know this probably. I wasn't the best hitter in the world, but man, you hit a ball in that cold, and your hands are ringing for weeks. Like it was the bees buzzing all over your hands. It was miserable, but I love the game, so I did
100%. So we talked about this. You did play in the College World Series at Rosenblatt Stadium, the original stadium. Steven and I actually 3 or 4 years ago went out to the College World Series for my 16th birthday. So it was the 2018 World Series in Omaha. It was beautiful. We had so much fun. It was a great time. But I'm sure as a player, it was so much better. I mean, I don't know. I think we talked about this when we were on the golf course, but I'm sure Omaha was just fantastic.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And it's very similar. And we didn't get to Williamsport for the Little League World Series, but you see that on TV now, and all the teams are pretty close. And you would think that even back then well, here's Texas. I think Texas was in there. I think Wichita State was in the year I was there. I'm trying to think of the others. I mean, there obviously were others, but you would think there was, these adversaries. These are the guys you're trying to beat down and win the College World Series. But there was such a family atmosphere, especially back then. I mean, we're talking, this is 1991, 91. And it's just, you were like hanging out with the other teams, and you have families that are sponsoring dinners, and you're going over like families' houses as a whole team having dinners, and they're having a parade in Omaha for you. Like, it's just like such a small town kind of feel. And that event, unlike it is now, it's much bigger. Was just a small, college baseball was just not like it is today, where every game's on TV. So it felt, to me as a player, it just felt so huge and so exciting. And, and we won our first game, and then it was a double 2-game elimination. So we won our first game and then lost our next 2. But it was just a magical experience for me. And as a freshman, I got to pitch a little bit, kind of in like mop-up duty. And it was the best thing. It was just amazing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it sounds like you chose the right school going to Miami, going to a College World Series your first year there. So
yeah, well, and then
we made the right pick.
We did have tough times after that, because we had our third base coach came in after Ron Frazier, and then he ended up leaving after the first year. And then luckily Jim Morris came. And then by that time I was pretty much done. But I'll tell you why. The reason why I feel like I was lucky. So I got hurt the beginning of my sophomore year was 1992. I tear my ACL, PCL, MCL, just doing sprints in the outfield. And it actually coincided with just about the same time. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Hurricane Andrew hits Miami August 23rd, 1992, and basically destroys everything south of our campus. And our campus was pretty messed up. We ended up not having school for 6 weeks. Crazy. And I had never experienced, coming up from up north, I had never experienced anything like that. And then to get hurt, and I was just kind of lost But what saved me, and really the true reason why I'm so excited, I was so excited to go to Miami. And I remember what my dad said: if something happens, where you're going to be the most happy. It was because I started doing radio games. Started doing games on the radio. I was I was on the team in rehabbing. Well, let's throw them behind the mic and have them talk about, some of that stuff. And that's how I got into broadcasting, which now, again, all these years later, I'm still doing. So
Yeah.
I am very thankful for my time there. I met, so many great friends that I still know today, played with a lot of great players, Charles Johnson, Alex Cora, who's the manager of the Red Sox now, Danny Graves, who played for the Reds. I mentioned Charles Johnson, who was an all-star for the Marlins. I mean,
He was a
just
catcher,
got to
correct,
witness
right?
a lot of great things and play with a lot of great players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's kind of how you made the transition then from hanging at the cleats to broadcast. And for our viewers who don't know, now this is as of per LinkedIn 2017. It was the director of international content for the PGA Tour. Now I'm sure that's updated as of now, but I couldn't find anything updated on your LinkedIn account. But that's what you had there.
Yeah, so it's funny because with COVID and the pandemic, we've had a lot of changes at the tour over the last year. And so I was director of international content for 3 years. And now I'm back doing sort of our originals, which is our documentaries, our weekly shows on Golf Channel, kind of our specialty, shows like that. So yeah, I tell stories on PGA Tour players. I tell, I've traveled 6 of the 7 continents, following players around the world. And now July will be my 20th anniversary at the tour. So it's pretty crazy to think about it. But the cool thing for me, I started as a associate producer. And so for those that don't know, in the industry, that's probably second or third from just starting out. So it's entry level, but a couple levels up. But then I was a field producer after that. Then I was a producer. So you kind of did everything. It was just an elevation. Then I was a senior producer. Then I was a coordinating producer. Then I was a director. So it's pretty wild how well they've taken care of me. But again, back to that sort of advice type of deal. I work really hard and I owe it to the sports background and the team background and the dynamic on how I feel like I sort of now run my team, because I go back to a lot of those stories, even from my days in Little League. And I use that sort of those team philosophies that I've sort of taken in, and I use those every day in my managing.
Something I've been wondering is when you go to a school like University of Miami and you play alongside guys like Alex Cora and Charles Johnson, who are MLB guys, people that you see on TV all the time, does it make it easier for you as somebody who's constantly interviewing people on the PGA Tour, right? So you're interviewing professional athletes all the time, to realize that these are just normal guys that people that you've grown up with, who, like Alex Cora, who's on TV all the time. People would see him as an interview of being something, they'd be scared to do. But for you, maybe it could make it easier for you when you sit down with a guy like Tiger Woods to be like, you know what, he's a normal guy. He has kids at home. He has a, wife. He has children. It's something like that can make it a little easier for you, because for most people, it's really intimidating.
Yeah. And by the way, it's intimidating even when you do it. And it certainly, yes. I mean, being around athletes my entire life and being around really good athletes my entire life certainly helped. I mean, there's no question about that. And even just, so before the tour, I was at CNN Sports Illustrated for 4.5 years. And there I was doing post-game interviews. I went to Super Bowls, we were doing other sports as well. And so I sort of, you kind of get used to it, right? But it's still very intimidating. And back when I first started at the tour, I'm sitting there on the range waiting for guys to come over to my camera and do interviews. And I'm nervous and dare I say I'm scared, right? I mean, it's kind of intimidating. You're right. But I don't know when it happened in my career, but there was a point in my career, whether it was, I don't know if I didn't realize it at the time or I did, but I'm like, I was older than these guys at that point, right? So if you think about somebody like a Jordan Spieth or Ricky Fowler, I'm older than those guys. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of great things in my own career. I haven't, won the US Open or the Players Championship, but man, I've done a lot of great things. So, once you get that in your mind, that again, like you just said, they are very normal people. And in fact, they're typical, pretty similar to me. Like we like the same things. We love golf. We love sports. We like to make jokes, like all that kind of stuff. And even those like a Tiger Woods, yeah, you certainly are very intimidated the first time. But I always tell the story about Tiger. I was doing an interview at Bay Hill one year, and I was pretty nervous. I hadn't done too many with Tiger at that point in my career. And we sit down and we're talking. And again, nobody, especially back then, this was probably like 2003, nobody talked to him like it was like he was this larger than life person.
Yeah.
And so we're going back and forth in the interview, and he says something. I ask him, well, what was your goal for this? And he goes, win. And he stops. He doesn't say anything else. I'm like, and I was sort of mad because I'm like, well, where's the answer? I need an answer like that. I'm not going to use that answer. And I go, really, win? Is that the answer? Like I kind of got mad. So I say back to him, is that the answer you're really going to give me? He goes, yeah, win. That's all I care about. I'm like, Tiger, I'm doing. And so we start having this back and forth. And he goes, I don't care if it's an eating contest. I want to win. I go, I bet you I could beat you in an eating contest. So we had this like, and then from that moment on, it was almost like I was talking to just some guy. And then, again, I think I did the last interview he did before his accident. I was in LA doing an interview with him 2 days before his accident. So, 20 years later, we're just two guys talking and we're asking about our families and stuff. So it changes. There's definitely a mindset, but it is still very uncomfortable in a lot of times.
Yeah, I think that's so cool though too, because as you can talk about when you were younger, back in 2003, I'm sure that nervous self on the range at Bay Hill for you to know that you were going to be the last person to have an interview with Tiger, possibly, the last time he's ever going to play golf.
Yeah, I got to tell you, that was it was very scary. I had just left LA, so that was our interview was on a Sunday, and then he had the accident on Tuesday morning. So when I left LA, I was with him for 3 hours, and it was, we had a great interview. It was about his career. It's actually for a special that airs tomorrow on I think it's an NBC show. I think it is an NBC show, and about his 25 years of his career, because it's 25th anniversary of his turning pro. And we were just talking about everything, and there's so many moments. So we weren't necessarily, we were more kind of like bigger ideas rather than, oh, tell me about this putt or this win. It was more of, what was it like to be in your shoes when it was Tiger Mania, or, how difficult was it to be the prodigy? Like these are big sort of emotional questions. And he was in such a great spot, and he was so cordial with his time, and he was so interesting. And I felt like I was on my game too. Like I felt like I had prepared. I had, and I lived his career. I worked pretty much the same time in his career. So I know all the sort of backstory. And of course I've known him now for a long time. So I just felt like the interview was like a really good interview and a really, really good discussion. And he was in a good mood. And then for that to happen, it's just devastating. And, it's just hard to see that, because again, now I see him differently than when I did in 2003. When I saw him in 2003, he was the larger than life athlete. He was, it was somebody that I was like, I love this guy. I love watching him play. Right. And now I see him as a father. Now I see him as a husband, or, all that sort of stuff. So it's amazing how your mindset grows with your experience.
Yeah. So one thing that my dad has always said about you is that he's convinced that if you put together an hour show or whatever it is, and you wanted to convey any emotion in that hour show, if you wanted everybody to cry, you could do it. So my question is this, sure, is when you're putting pieces together, where does it come through your vision to get, say you want emotion? Like, because when you're conducting an interview with Tiger Woods, say, right, and you don't know, going into it exactly what you want, but when you're going through and you're putting the piece together, here I want to convey this emotion. Do you know that going into the interview that these are the questions I want to get out of somebody in order to convey a certain emotion when I'm putting the piece together? Because like that's something that's obviously going to be really hard. But I'm sure you've done it for long enough that you're able to go in there and, have the right mindset during the interview to get that piece exactly, that sound bite that you want, or, something like that.
So that's such a good question, because it actually is a little bit of the opposite. So yes, you want to go in there prepared. You want to know your facts. There was a guy when I worked at CNN by the name of Jim Huber. I would suggest anybody who sees this, go look up Jim Huber pieces on YouTube, because he was just this legendary figure in broadcasting. He had this incredible voice. And I remember producing some of his stories, and he'd show up at an interview. And as a producer, I had done the research. I had put a little packet together for him, and he was going to do the interview. And he never looked at my packet, never even held it in his hands. He sat there. He said hi to the person he was interviewing, and then they just talked, right? So, and I asked him one day, I'm like, why that? What's the philosophy there? He goes, I want to have a conversation. I don't want to go in there. I'm going to, be prepared inside. And if something comes up, I'm going to be able to jump a stat in there, or I'm going to talk about a win or something like that. But in general, I want to let them guide the story. So if you go into an interview with the story in your head, yes, that's fine, but it could change. And then if you don't change with it, you miss all the best stuff, right? So when I go into it prepared. I start the questions, and then I'm listening, and I'm looking at their face for the emotion. Maybe they're laughing and they're in a great mood the whole time, or maybe they're very sad and it's a difficult topic. And again, that's the other part. You have to sort of read, what the story is. I'll give you another example of something that I did last year. So Camilo Villegas, who's one of our golfers from Colombia, his 3-year-old daughter died of a brain tumor. And 2 months after she died, and I had known him, for a good 15 years, he had asked me if I could help tell their story. So I went, and did an interview with he and his wife. And it was so difficult because A, I know him, and B, I am a father. So the idea of losing a 3-month-old or 3-year-old, is devastating. And so I knew going in, I don't have to do anything. The emotion's already there. The story is there. Like, I don't want to over dramatize anything. I want them to tell their story. So I'm just asking questions as a friend. I'm asking questions to get the answers, but I am not going overboard. If he starts to cry, I'm not hammering him. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, there's a little subtlety to it, but that's, again, you have to that's experience. That's just doing thousands of interviews. And then, of course, once you get into the edit room, you can create emotion with what you write. You can create emotion with the visuals, and you can create with music. The music's a huge part of creating emotion. So that's everything that goes into it. I love the writing aspect of it. I love the music aspect of it. Those are my two favorite things. But again, you can't force it. And I think people notice, when it's forced, it comes across as it's forced. But if it's not, and you just, kind of let it, ride, if you will, then that's where you get the great stuff. And it's nice of your dad to say that.
Well, yeah. And, that's something that Steve and I have both noticed that, we got to work on, as interviewers, is kind of rolling with the punches.
Yeah.
We can write all of our notes down. We can have, a way of exactly how we want the interview to go. But in order for the interview to go really well, I think that it's important for us to let the person talk, let them kind of guide the interview. And that's something that we're learning. So I'm glad that you said that, because I think that that's something that would be great for us to learn. And we're just getting into it. This is, our 4th or 5th episode. So obviously you've got a ton of, a lot of experience on us, that's for sure. But I'm glad that you said that, because I think that's something that, we both definitely need to work on, as a group. So
yeah, listen, it's all about listening. And again, you can go into a story with the idea of what your story is going to be, but if you don't let it change around you, if you don't follow like the good stuff, then it's just the story you already had in your mind. It's not what it should be. You know what I mean? You got to follow, if somebody gives you, I'll give you one more, for instance. This is not my story, but we had a producer, Phil Mickelson. She was going to interview Phil Mickelson, and Phil Mickelson had just had his second child. And the headlines were his wife was pretty sick during the pregnancy. And so this person was interviewing Phil, and Phil starts talking about how his son almost died and how his wife almost died during the birth. And no one had known that. No one had heard that before. And if you go back to watch the video, the producer, you could tell there's a big pause, and he is like, so I'm going to do this because just for effect, he's like leaning in to the interviewer, like, I'm telling you my deepest feelings. And, his eyes are watering up, and he is like, I'm giving you something here. And you could tell there's a pause because the interviewer didn't like follow up with another question, like, how hard was it for you? How did you get through it? Like something like that. There's a pause, and you hear some paper rustling, and the question comes out. So tell me about your 60-degree wedge play. You know what I mean? Like, so they clearly had an agenda on a sheet of paper that they were following. They were going question by question on their piece of paper. They were not listening to what Phil was giving them. And then you could see Phil's eyes. He's almost like it shook him back to, oh, okay, let me talk about golf again. You know what I mean? So you have to listen, and you have to be prepared that the story is going to be different than what you thought of when you got there.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's such great advice. Although we'll say that seems a bit odd to me that somebody would just go directly into talking about golf after something,
It's
such a
pretty
serious
uncomfortable.
moment.
It's pretty uncomfortable. Yeah, the video is
Yeah.
pretty. I use it as a teaching tool to some of our young producers.
Yeah, well, I would think so too, because for you now, as you said, you've been at the tour for 20 years. You have relationships with every single golfer. It's no longer really going in and interviewing these guys just for the show. I feel like for you, it's kind of catching up with people as well. You've developed relationships with all of these guys, and it's like you said, you don't just see Tiger as a golfer anymore. Now you see him as a father, and it's
Yeah, and at the same
bigger picture.
time, yep. And at the same time, I also have a job to do, right? So you have to balance that line. You want to make sure that, hey, they know, like I have never been, and listen, there are some guys I love, and there's some guys I don't love as much, right? In any business, right? There's some guys that I would sit and have a beer with, and there's some guys I don't want to have a beer with, right? But at the same time, there's going to be a point where I have to talk to them, and they have to agree to, and it could be after a incredibly difficult loss. It could be after the loss of a child. It could be, whatever it is. So I look at it this way. I am their colleague first. I am their acquaintance second. And then if there's a friendship there, that's fine. But it's based off of the first two things. First, I have to work first, right? I have to do my job. I'm getting paid to do my job. And I'm also telling, I want to be, they know, I think, and this is where the experience and the sort of relationships come in. They know that I am going to respect their story, respect their career, their life, whatever it is. And I'm going to, know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to just go in there, haphazardly and throw stuff around. So they know I'll be prepared. They know I will tell their story to the best of my ability. And again, I've had guys upset with me before. I've had guys very happy with me before. So you run into that, but they know I'm always colleague, acquaintance, and then, some friends. But that's kind of how I've sort of made my career with the players.
Yeah, so amongst the players, I know you talked about them being colleagues and friends.
Yep.
And having to work together as well. What were the emotions after the Tiger accident? And because you did mention, this is a job and these are your coworkers, these are people you're competing against, but at the end of the day, we're all human. Just could you describe how the emotion was like in the tour? And
yeah, it was it was very tough. So first of all, as you know, Stephen, everybody, including me, owes their big part of their career to Tiger Woods. So prior to, Tiger turned pro in 1996, right? Prior to that, golf was very niche. It was very small, just like it, in a weird way it is today. Like you still have your golf fanatics. You have the old guys that play in the morning, then go watch and fall asleep on their couches in the afternoon, right? I mean, that's kind of how it is. But now golf has grown, 100 times, thousands of times. And it's really all because of Tiger. We had, in his peak for 20 years, we had Muhammad Ali. We had Babe Ruth, right? Tiger Woods is those guys. And so for our sport, it changed the entire dynamic of the sport. My building wouldn't have been built if Tiger wasn't there. This house probably would not have been built if Tiger wasn't there. So I think all the players as well, they wouldn't be playing for millions and millions of dollars if it wasn't for Tiger. I think in 1988, so this is only 8 years before Tiger is a pro. One guy, it was the first guy, I think it was Curtis Strange, was the first guy to make $1 million on tour. And now I think it was last year, over 90 or 100 guys made $1 million on tour. So it just has changed the sport completely. So it's needless to say, everybody was devastated. Everybody was, I don't know if you guys saw one of our events. I think it was 2 weeks after the accident. Everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people wore red. A lot of our players wore red and black on Sunday in honor of Tiger. And it was just, we all know what he's meant to all of us, and all those young guys that play now, they were, he was their hero. And so, he's meant a lot to a lot of us, and it was tough. It's been tough. It's been really tough.
Yeah, and you mentioned, without Tiger Woods, maybe this house wouldn't be built. This is, for both sides, for your family. Your wife works for the First Tee, so you're covering golf, but she's trying to promote golf to a younger audience. So it really is, when you say our house is built because of a guy like Tiger Woods. Golf becoming a bigger deal really did help somebody, your family, but mine as well. There's multiple tiers to this. It's not that you're not there alone.
Well, what your dad is doing right now, getting ready for next year and all the things he's building. It's it's just amazing. It's been really fun. It's really, really fun. And your dad's almost been there as long as I have. So it's been really fun to see golf grow. And, in a weird way, the pandemic helped golf because people could play golf even when they were sort of on lockdown, because you could be outside, you could socially distance.
Yeah, we actually got a round in together.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We did. You hit the ball very well. So it's, we're very thankful. And my wife, what I love about her job is she's trying to get the next generation, but she's also in the First Tee. They're trying to teach life skills too. So, one thing that's great about the game of golf is beyond as a recreation or beyond as a participation sport or watching the best players in the world, it teaches a lot of great things. You're counting your own score, you're calling penalties on yourself, you're having etiquette with the player next to you. It's not necessarily, let's do everything we can to win. It's more of a, a little bit of a gentleman's sport, if you will, or gentlewoman's sport. So there's a lot of great lessons in golf. So that's kind of the thing I love about hers job compared to mine. Yeah, we're on the professional side. We're on the big money side, the flash and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, think about what the First Tee has done, but also think about what golf has done for charity all around the world. It's at the end of the day, it's those charity stories, it's those personal stories of people being affected by our sport that stick with me.
Yeah, you mentioned that your wife does do the First Tee teaching lessons to younger golfers and children. What do you think your career and your job has? What lesson do you think you've learned?
Wow, Steven, killing me here. That was a good one. I'll tell you. I can tell you. So, my dad was a very hardworking. He was a dry cleaner. So he would get up in the morning at like 3 a.m. for 30 years. And he would be sweating in the steamy dry cleaning, cleaning people's clothes, like just a, very salt of the earth job, right? I, on the other hand, have gotten to travel the world, follow golfers around the world and create content, right? When you think of the two different sides of that, it's almost like silly, like, why did I get that? But what I learned from him was that incredible work ethic. And I feel like I brought that to my career. Just thinking of him, grinding and sweating and not complaining, and then getting up the next day and doing it again, and then doing it again. And almost like in sports, right? When we talk about baseball, you're stringing days together, right? Like, it's one day might be practice, but then the next day you have a game. Well, then you got to recover, and you got to string them together. And so that's kind of the biggest lesson I learned is, you get what you put into it, right? So especially in this, if you guys are doing sports television or sports content, you don't just start at NBC. You don't just start at the PGA Tour. You start in Billings, Montana, or you start doing a podcast, or you know what I mean? Like, so I think it's the two things. I think it's hard work. I think it's patience. And then I think, listen, it's how you treat people. I have been around the business now for, probably 26 years. And there are still people that I deal with and talk to that I met, week one. And now 25 years later, we might meet each other in a different capacity or in a different sphere, but we still work. So if you're kind of a jerk to them 25 years ago, they remember that. So I try to treat people as good as I can in a high stress environment. I try to treat them how I would want to be treated, because I've been, there's been points where people don't necessarily treat you the best. And then the hard work. Those are the sort of my two things. And then I guess the last thing, not to talk too much, but the last thing for me is when all heck is breaking loose, and it tends to do it in sports television, I want to be the calmest guy in the room. So I want to be the most prepared. So the pre-production is huge. I also want to be calm, even though inside I'm going crazy and all heck is breaking loose around me. I want to be the calmest guy in the room so that everyone around me who's working with me or for me is calm as well. And then I can, go behind the curb and throw my head against the wall. But up until that, I want to be calm and cool and collective and get what you can get. And then I can, freak out afterwards.
Yeah. And were you in Augusta last week for Masters Week?
I was there for 11 days. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's gotta be, it's a lot of fun, but at the same time, I'm sure it's a ton of work for you, especially you were the head of production there, weren't you?
Yeah. So our team is hired by Augusta National to do all the video production for masters.com. So if you can imagine, from 6 a.m. to about 10 p.m. every day for 11 straight days, we are grinding, and it is amazing. And it is it's the grand cathedral of golf. It's everything you think it is and more. I've been there now. I've been doing this for 6 years, but even before that at PGA Tour, I was going there and creating stuff before. It's still, you're like a kid at Christmas. If you're a golf fan, it's just the greatest place on the planet. It's just unbelievable. And to be able to tell stories there with really, really great access to some of the greatest players in the world, at this incredible place is such an honor. And it's, I would say it's probably, it's the best honor I've had, in my career for sure.
Yeah. And this year, especially with Hideki Matsuyama winning, I mean, the PGA Tour starts, an international initiative in Japan, 10, 15 years ago. And now we, see it put into fruition when, Hideki Matsuyama wins. So I'm sure that's, tons of stories for you, made out of that. That's for sure.
Well, think about this. So we have a tournament in Japan that just started 2 years ago, the Zozo Championship, which I was at, the first one. Or actually, I was at the 2019 one, the one Tiger won. It was amazing. And that alone, Tiger coming to Japan for our event, and I think Hideki ended up finishing second. So that was like a big deal. And there were just thousands and thousands of people at that event in Japan. And then the Olympics are in Japan this year, with golf in the Olympics for the second time now. And now Hideki winning the Masters. I mean, it is, that is a rabid golf fandom in Japan. And I think it's just going to explode. We may not see it in 5 years. We may not see it in 10 years, but probably around 10 years from now, all those little kids are going to be dreaming of being Hideki Matsuyama because they've seen him wear that green jacket, and then they're going to come out. So it's huge. It's huge for everybody. It's great. This is a global sport. And I as we talked about at the beginning, I did international television for 3 years and, got to see it firsthand. Yeah, it's pretty big, and it was very exciting, and you saw it in his emotion. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, and you've talked about, now I hear that you've traveled. You said that you've traveled to multiple continents, but I hear that you traveled
except Antarctica.
Okay, I hear that you traveled to visit Vijay Singh's family. Now, is this true?
Okay, well, it's sort of true. So that's funny that look at you with all your in-depth research. So it was actually, I consider this my biggest break at the tour. So I don't know if everyone's going to know this, but back in like 06, 07, 08, in that, I guess it would have been 06, Vijay, during the Tiger era, became the number one player in the world. He won 10 times or 11 times, $10 million. I mean, he was on top of the world. I was friends with his sort of strength coach. And I had always told him, I'm like, hey, his name is Joey. I'm like, Joey, let me get with Vijay. And Vijay, didn't like to do any television, didn't like to do any content. Like he was just very into his own thing. And I just kept bugging him and bugging him. Then one day VJ invites me to the range at Sawgrass to talk about it. And then the next day we're at his house shooting him working out. Fast forward a year later, he's #1 in the world. And his agent calls me. Hey, VJ wants you to come to Fiji with him. He's opening up a golf course there. I'm like, oh my gosh. And here I am. I'm like just a middle of the road producer. I'm not managing anybody. I have no control over any budget. And I say yes. And I hire my friend who's the camera guy that I've been using out of New York for like 20 years. And we end up going. And, we spent 5-6 days there. And he had not been back for 20 years since he would turn professional. And to see these people we talk about a small little village on the ocean in the middle of nowhere, and people are running out of the trees, the palm trees, out of their village in their best, clothing. Oh, VJ, like he was so awestruck, and it was really cool to see. And then to tell his whole story. I mean, the fact that he grew up, playing golf barefoot in a little town in the middle of nowhere, and he becomes the #1 player in the world. So that was a big break for me. And that was sort of, we did not do a lot of international stuff back then. And that was sort of the start of us really, telling all the stories, not just the guys from the US.
So you consider that maybe your big break, but how about something that is your favorite thing that you've produced while at the tour? And you could go back in your days at Sports Illustrated and CNN, but maybe one of the pieces that you've made that really stands out to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many pieces, and they were all, they're all special at the time you do them, so it's hard to do that. But I can tell you my favorite shoot of all time. So it was the first year that we were doing video for the Masters. And again, you have to go backtrack. So that would have been in 2000, what did I say, 6 years? So 2015 was the first year we did video for them. But back in 2007, I had done a documentary on Gary Player, legendary South African golfer, one of the big three, Jack, Gary, Ernie. And he had, for 50 years at the Masters, had always walked down Magnolia Lane, which is the entrance to Augusta National. And we shot it that day, and I just remember it was just so incredible. And he's walking down, and he's telling me stories, and I got a guy, my camera guy, and it's just the three of us. Just amazing, right? So so fast forward to 2015, and I want to make a big splash with the Masters people. So one of my ideas was, let's get the big three to walk down Magnolia Lane. And so sure enough, we make it happen. And so here I am at Augusta National. I have closed down Magnolia Lane. So I have a police officer blocking the last 200 yards of Magnolia, or 100 yards of Magnolia Lane. And I am walking with Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, and Arnold Palmer down Magnolia Lane in their green jackets and shooting this piece of content. I mean, I have the picture at my office, and it's just like that to me. You're talking about the three of the biggest legends of the game. For me to be with them at that moment, and it turned out Arnie died 2 years later, so it was a pretty seminal moment in my career. So forget the pieces, forget all that. The fact that I was there with them was pretty spectacular.
Yeah, and that's incredible. I mean, I don't think that if you told me right now when I was 18 years old that I could, walk down with, three guys like that, I'd sign up for that job as fast as possible.
I have a lot of those moments where I have a lot of those moments where I pinch myself, where it's just like, I cannot believe this is what I'm doing right now. And the funny thing is I try to, in those moments, I try to like be present so that I can enjoy it a little bit. Even before the Masters, I went out to West Palm Beach, and I was doing a shoot with Dustin Johnson, who was the defending champion this year. Mm-hmm. And we're on his boat. And I remember just sitting on the back of the boat. We had gotten everything we need, and we're just driving in the boat back. And it's Dustin Johnson, #1 player in the world, Masters champion. I got my buddies who are my camera crew, and I'm just sitting on the back of the boat chilling. I'm like, this is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, at that point, it's not even a job. It's a vacation, sitting on the back of a boat.
No, it's
best golfer in the world.
Yeah, and it is, and it's important to love what you're doing. If you can find that thing. I think I've sold this to you, Stephen. I tell it to my daughter all the time. Like, she needs to follow. Like, she's got to do what she wants to do, and then you can figure out how to make money, and then you can figure out how to have a career on it. But if you don't love it, then it's just going to be so monotonous and so boring, and you're going to be it's really going to feel like work. And certainly, listen, you guys know this, like it's a grind. There's a lot of, and I've missed a lot of things over the years, traveling and having to work, weekends and holidays and all that, and overnights and all that sort of stuff that I've done. But man, in the big scheme of things, the fact that you get paid to do something you love in a sport you love, I mean, I guess my only regret is it wasn't MLB. It wasn't baseball. If I could have done baseball, I think that would have been pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think that would have been cool. I will say though, me as a baseball player right now, I think that covering golf would be something that I'd really enjoy. I think that golf is, and you're the same way. We've played golf together. Golf is something that it's just so easy, to enjoy it. I mean, how can you not love golf? So I think anybody that covers sports though for a living is in a lucky situation. I think that's my goal. That's what I want to go into when I get older. But it was good to get some insight from you, on how to get into it.
Yeah, just listen, follow those guiding lights, right? Like follow those people that are, going to give you, even if it's just a crack in the door, jump into that, that crack in the door and do it. And again, I give you guys credit because you're already doing it by doing this. A lot of people show up to the end of their college career and they've got, I've taken all these classes, I've done all this stuff, but what do you have to show the guy who's going to hire you, right? Mm-hmm. You guys at the very least have this, and then, take the internship, do the next thing, I almost don't say no, and to a fault a lot of times, even still, like I still feel like after 20 years, I don't want to miss anything. So I don't say no. And trust me, my wife, I think she's nodding her head in the background here. She's like, yeah, I know. But it's, you don't want to miss out and you don't want to also lose that opportunity. So you guys are doing a great job with this podcast. I think it's just the start. I would say do everything and anything. And, of course, I'm here to help too. And your dad's here to help, like use those. You have connections that a lot of people aren't going to have. So yeah. You should certainly use those as well. Don't use them as a crutch, but use them because it's a hard business. And there's a lot of people that want to get into it.
Yeah.
So just jump on any opportunity.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that too. That's always something, of course I'd love to work with the PGA Tour, but I don't want to be that guy that, is there because of their father. And that's something that I've always, want to talk about. So, that's why I'm doing something like this. I just want to create as much content as, I possibly can because I want to get my name out there, and be on my own. You talked about too, your father was a very hardworking man, working, in cleaners in Boston, Massachusetts. That's something that I'm sure you worked for him. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm sure you learned, your hard work, from a young age when you were working for your father. So
I learned what I didn't want to do for a living.
Yeah. Right. But at the same time, as much as you joke about that, I'm sure you learned some very valuable things when you were working with him.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, again, and even my mom was a nurse and then a professor, and she was grinding. And at that point, women weren't as in the workplace as they are now. And so she was a great example of hard work, and she was a great example of dedication. And they sort of, all the things they did for me to go to college, all the things they did for me to give my sister and I, anything we needed. Like it's those lessons, I think. That I try to give my kids, but at the same time, like you said, you need to be yourself. Steven needs to be himself. Like you need to have your own voice, and no matter what, I mean, there are plenty of guys out there that are sons of broadcasters, and they're not going to get the job if they're not any good. They're not going to get the job. They might get in the door because of their name, but then what do you do with it?
Exactly.
Right. And so I think that's a huge aspect of it. And again, if you have your own voice, if you have your own style, if you have your own thoughts, like, we talk about diversity of opinions all the time. The more opinions, the more styles that you can incorporate, the better, because, the audience is so diverse. You need to sort of, have those, mesh all those, kind of groups together. You know what I'm saying? So it's a great time. I think it's a great time to be in content because, as you can tell from streaming services and live sports, I mean, there's just a million ways to go, and people are just, if they're not doing an activity, they're taking in content.
Yeah.
So, I think that's why I'm talking a lot. So you have even more content.
No, exactly. No, and that's what we want to. And for us, I think Steven can attest to this is, is the more content we have, the more we can work with, the more we learn. Every single time that we do an interview like this, we're taking a step in the right direction. I think that's the same way for you. When you were, like you said, when you started at University of Miami, talking on the radio for the first time, I'm sure if you went back and you listened to your first broadcast now, I'm sure you cringe at, just hearing
I
some
can't
of the
even
stuff
watch
you
my
said.
features. I can't even watch the features I used to do. Even a feature probably, I mean, there's a few that I can say, oh, wow, that's like VJ is one that stands up because that was just, I thought it was we just struck lightning in a bottle. But there are definitely pieces, there are definitely shows that I did that I just cannot believe I did that. And you kind of fall for, hey, this is what the look and feel is of the time, and you kind of fall for that. Certainly, if you go back, I did do a little bit of hockey when I was a kid, when I was in high school for our hockey team. I did a little radio then, or a little TV, and it was a joke. Like I was yelling and screaming and that kind of stuff. But again, I tried it, and I wasn't scared to try something. And again, as a broadcaster, you're putting yourself out there. Like you're putting your face, your voice, your opinions out there. Steve was putting his face, his voice, opinions out there, and so there's a lot of not pressure, but you got to be in your own sphere. You got to have some confidence to be able to put yourself out there, right? Because you know how it is on social media. People are going to kill you one way or the other. So you got to forget all about that stuff. Do your thing, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you got to find another thing to do. So I think, again, I go back to sports because I always go back to sports because it's really what I love. The best players are going to play the most. But you need all the others on the team to round out the team. Mm-hmm. You need the utility guy that comes in for a defensive replacement, right? You need a relief pitcher who's just going to get the lefty out, a lefty specialist. Like you need these types of players. They may not be the big stars, but every great team has these unsung heroes. And it could be the guy who never plays, but just lights up the locker room, and everybody, when you're down, somebody brings them all up, right? You could be any of that, right? So you got to find out where you guys fit in that and then run with it. Again, not everybody's going to be, there's only one Chris Berman for ESPN, right? There's only one. So yeah. That's a hard thing to get to. So what else can you do to be on that team, to have a great career, to have a satisfied life, to feel like you're accomplished something in your career? So you just got to go for it and do it.
You'd mentioned, being that guy that, even if they don't play, they're the one in the locker room that's, the spark plug, if you will, or, stuff like that. When you're working, say, as a production specialist at the Masters, and you're overseeing all these guys, you kind of have to be a combination of both, in my opinion, right? So you have to be that guy that's there, the Chris Berman, if you will, that's in charge of everybody. But at the same time, you also have to be the one that's keeping the morale up, because, like you said, 11 days in a row at the Masters, you're there at as early as possible, and you're not leaving till late at night. So, you have to be a combination of both. And I guess my question is how have you done that? And is that something that you learned in sports, or is that something that you just adapted to over time and your 20 years working as a production person at the tour?
Yeah, it's both. Yeah. So like there's a story back from my high school baseball team. Our coach was just a kind of a maniac. He was one of those old school coaches. He also coached football, who in the middle of the winter in New England, he's wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and he's, punching guys in the face and running down, like one of those old school kind of hard ass, coaches, right? And then he coaches baseball, and he has that same sort of attitude. And we all, by my senior year, we were just sick of him, And it turned out he was a great mentor and a great friend as I got older, but he was just difficult to play for. And so we end up, one time I'm like, these guys, I could tell the whole team was really just, you could just see the vibe in the locker room wasn't very good. So we ended up going out to the driving range, ironically enough. And we had printed out a picture of his face, and we ended up running and putting it on one of the flags. And then so all day we were just hitting balls at this flag of our coach, if you will. And I remember we had the best time, and we're laughing, and guys are, really just trying to hammer that. And so I remember that. And now as I got, again, it's one fleeting moment in my life, but then as you get older, I've had shows, I've had productions, I've had managers who you just are miserable around, and it's not a fun place to be. It's not a fun place to work. You never feel never feel rewarded. You never feel, gratitude from them, or you never feel like he or she are pulling their weight. Right. So I always decided that when I got the opportunity to manage, whether it was a team, a group, a project, whatever, again, I was going to be the calmest guy, so that because everything typically goes wrong at some point, or at least there are parts. But then I also was going to be the first guy there. Like I wanted that was important to me. So every day at the Masters, I was there before a single one of my employees was going to get there. So they knew when they walked in, they were going to see me working already. And again, it's subtle, but I think it was important. And then I had fun. Like I like to have a little fun with them. Like at the end of the day, we're making golf TV. We're making golf content. It is not brain surgery. We are not finding the vaccine for COVID-19, right? This is just golf content. So why are we going crazy stressed out over it, right? Let's just tell stories. Let's, get our stuff done, but at the same time, we can have a little fun too. So I definitely am more of the guy that keeps it light. I have worked with other people that aren't like that, and that is successful too. But my style is always, I'm going to outwork you, and we're going to have a little bit of fun, and we're not going to take ourselves too seriously. And that's something that, again, I learned. My dad was very difficult as a father/coach too, and I never wanted to be like that. So I think I might actually go the opposite way, where I really want to make it a fun experience for everybody. But you got to get the work done.
Yeah, that's the first priority. That's for sure.
Without question. I mean, we're getting paid a handsome amount of money to do the job, so you got to do the job.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, the tour. I don't mean me. We've been hired by Augusta National to create content for them. So we need to create good, compelling content. That's number one.
You don't want to mess with the men of the Masters. That's for sure.
You don't want to mess with Augusta National Golf Club. That's for sure. And again, listen, we're putting our name on it too. So that personal pride you have in what you do, that's where it comes into play.
Well, Seth, I think we can start wrapping up here, but I'd like to thank you for coming on. Switching roles today. You're normally the first. You're the person that's interviewing everybody else, but today it was a little bit of the opposite. So that was
making
fun.
Me sweat. I'm nervous, you guys. You guys are killing me. I look at Steven and I'm just like freaking out over there.
No, don't worry about it.
You're making me nervous, dude.
No, I'm just soaking it all in. I didn't say too much this episode, but I just think, like you said, it's important just to soak it in and listen to what you're saying, because, Riley and I can ask the questions, but at the end of the day, it's what you say and the experience you tell us and the lessons you're telling us that are really going to pay off in the end. So, we really appreciate you coming out on Zoom. Hopefully one day we can do this in person when everything clears up.
First of all, I want to come to campus because I haven't been to a real college campus in lots of years. So it's got to be fun to do it there. But let me just tell you this one last quick thing before I go. So there was a point in my career, probably halfway through it, where I felt, and I think I said this earlier, that I was like older than some of the players. And I felt like the last thing I want to do is be the old guy that shows up and interviews these young stars, like they're not going to relate to me. I'm not going to relate to them. So, and this is true. I used to color my hair. I don't know if you guys see this gray hair right here, right? So I used to color my hair. And I was like, I don't want them to think I'm old. I don't want them to think. And then someone, again, another important person in my life told me, why would you hide all the experience you had? Like, why would you hide that? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And it resonated with me so much that I stopped that day forward. So now when I show up, and again, I have 20 years of the sort of respect and of my work, they know, okay, this is a serious guy who's been with the tour for 20 years, which is pretty good, and has done a lot of really cool things. Let's get it done. So again, I think it goes back with every single episode of this show, or whatever your next show is, or whatever the show is 10 years from now, or whatever you're doing 10 years from now, is a stepping stone. And you guys are on completely the right path, and you guys are really good at it too. So, you should just, keep honing your craft, talking to people like me, or even other people that have different, areas of expertise. Like I loved when you talked to, and I forget his name, but the singer,
Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie. Yep. And I know his backstory, and I know you guys knew each other in high school and stuff like that. But to me, the best thing is when you're learning about other things, because I'm always fascinated with who is successful at what they do? Are there common traits between all of them, right? And so you guys soaking all that up, and then the way you guys present it, I think you guys do a great job. So kudos
Thank
to
you.
you. Thanks for having me. And anytime you I want to chat or come by the studio or whatever, come on a shoot. Let's go.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I
We really
appreciate it.
appreciate it.
Of course.
It was
All
fun.
right.
Again.
Steven, be
Yeah.
nice to my niece. Bye.
I will.
Later.
All
See
right.
you.